Today we are in Mark chapter 14, verse 1. Mark 4. What's that?
We've never gone this fast before.
Yeah, we just skip over. Well, we'll come back. Don't worry. So Mark chapter 14, verse 1, and so verses 1. We're going to go through verses 1 and 2. So the beginning of this chapter is a start off of the plot to kill Jesus. So verse 1 says, "It was now 2 days before the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him, for they said, 'Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people.'" And so we see here a couple attributes of things that are happening in regards to these first couple verses. And as I dug into these verses, we see an aspect of evil. And we see that Jesus is actually in a battle, not just against flesh and blood, as the Bible tells us in Ephesians chapter 6, but our battles against the principalities and powers and rulers of the spiritual realm. And so we see the principalities and powers of the spiritual realm were in full disdain at this point and working through the chief priests and scribes. They're in full bore tilt to go after Jesus and take him out at this point. And so it's not just people, it's the powers and entities behind and coming through the people that are actually Jesus is at odds with here. And we see some really important principles in these first couple verses, that just because a person is religious, or just because a person is a religious leader, like the scribes and the chief priests, we're just a normal Christian here like us today, we have to realize we're all vulnerable personally to the influence of demonic spiritual forces. And to think about it, so some of the most evil people were the most religious people of the day. And so evil has many faces, and it's not just Pol Pot and Stalin and Hitler. It's not just those people. Evil can rear its head in some of the most unlikely places. And sometimes that's in the places that we may not even expect. And these were the most religious, respected people of the day. And so I think is a clear principle, and it was humbling to me to really go back over this and look that I need to personally guard my own heart. Because if the highest religious leaders of the day were susceptible and vulnerable to evil, to kill the Son of God, I need to be very guarded in my heart. That's why the Bible tells us that we are to personally guard our hearts. And I see these verses, that these religious people were doing something evil, I see it as a cautionary tale. And it actually stimulates me personally to a healthy, fearful awareness, and it should be to all of us, to remember this verse in Proverbs chapter 4:23. "Guard your heart with all diligence, for from it springs the issues of life." Or other verses say, "For it is the wellspring of life." Guard your heart above all else, for it is the wellspring of life. Proverbs 4:23. Because obviously, even the most religious people of the day, they weren't guarding their heart. There was pride, there was envy, there was jealousy stirring up inside of them, and Satan used that as his instrument. And so to me, these few verses are very humbling to realize I can be used as Satan's instrument if I don't guard my heart. No matter how religious I get, no matter how much of the Bible I memorize, I have to have a soft heart of worship towards the Lord all the time. So otherwise, so these first couple verses are very, like I said, cautionary to us that these demonic forces can work anywhere at any time. And again, I think this guards us as well as Christians against the cult of personality. And so we see many mega churches and things that happen where people forget who they're following. You know, we're all called to follow Jesus Christ. He is our God and our leader, not a super mega pastor. Though they may be well-intentioned and great people, you know, wonderful men of God, some people disregard and lay down their personal walk with Christ to just drink in whatever a mega pastor says and just follow them blindly. And that's not the way, because guess what? We have verses like this that remind us we may have wonderful pastors, but they're vulnerable too. And we have to follow Jesus Christ, number one, and realize that even the highest, best, most respected pastors that we have, they're broken, fallen men too. They're susceptible to evil. How many great, really good men of God have fallen in some kind of a scandal that we've seen? And I think this verse, it softens my heart to realize too, I don't look at them for their scandal, because I don't follow them. I follow Jesus Christ. I can actually have more compassion on them because I can see, you know, that guy did 30 years of great gospel work and he became vulnerable, whatever it was, pride, greed, and he had a failure. Well, people know his life from that failure. And I think with verses like this, we can realize, like, we're all broken. And we can actually have compassion for people who have failed and opened the door for Satan in their lives, because they're not the one that gives us salvation. It's actually Jesus Christ. So these are verses that remind me of some of those Christian themes. Also, we see a couple other attributes of evil in these verses. We can actually learn from evil, and there's some wisdom in that many times, like there's some books, The Art of War, and one of the things that they train at like West Point when you're a military general, they train you on understanding your enemy. And if it's almost as valuable to understand your enemy as much as you understand your own tactics, because you can exploit your enemy. You understand your enemy. You know who you're working with. And the Bible has, in a similar way, it is a military manual in that it gives us lots of information about our enemy. And I think that's on purpose. I don't think God did that accidentally. And we see aspects of these verses when we dig a little deeper and observe some of the nature and the context of evil, some of the attributes of evil. And I think as Christians, we need to be wise to how evil works. And we see it right here in display. And one of the things we see is that evil likes to operate in darkness and deception. In darkness and deception. In contrast to how good operates. How does good operate? In light and truth. Light and truth. That's how we should be operating as Christians. And if you've come across evil people in your life, you hang around them long enough, you'll see this theme of darkness and deception. It just surrounds and circles them, and you know people who are caught in evil. They've been vulnerable to the devil. They've allowed demonic forces in their lives. You stay around them long enough, you'll find out. You'll just be like, man, there's something creepy about this person. There's a darkness and a deception around their personality. And in contrast, you meet a good person a good, stand-up, loving, born-again, believer, Christian, and you'll find these two aspects. You'll say, man, this person carries the light. They're not hiding stuff. They are who they are. They're an open book. They are who they are over here. When they're alone and nobody's watching, that's who they are. They are a light to the world, and they operate in truth, light and truth. That's what a Christian does. And so you see this dichotomy. That's how evil operates, in darkness and deception. And we see that by this verse. Part of that verse 1, it says, seeking to arrest him by stealth and kill him. That's what they were trying to do, by stealth. They're operating in secret. And there's a great, Paul elaborates on this, and I love Ephesians chapter 5, and he elaborates even more on this attribute of evil. And he says in chapter 5, starting in verse 8, he says, for at one time you were in darkness, but now you are light in the world. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. And anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore, it says, awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead, and let Christ's light shine upon you. And so we see this dichotomy that the good is done in the daylight, and darkness harbors evil. And there's one thing that I have told my kids for many years, especially as they came into their teenage years, and I still tell them now, is that nothing good happens after midnight unless you're working or taking care of sick people. And so that I tell them that over and over, like, there ain't no reason you need to be out after midnight. There's nothing good is going to be happening unless you're working a night shift as a nurse or something like that. And so this is also this concept. This is also kind of the allure that surrounds all the conspiracy theories of the world. That there's some hidden darkness in there, and somebody's conspiring behind the scenes, and that's the nature of good people, of why we're interested in conspiracy theories, because good people want light to be shined on that stuff. That's why when you hear conspiracy theories and things like that, some of us as Christians, and we have light inside of us, it's kind of intriguing to us, and we want to kind of dig in, because we see there's something. It's actually, this verse is at work in Ephesians 5. We inherently know as Christians there's some kind of evil going on, and we need to expose it. Because this is what Paul said. It's actually one of the commands that Paul gives us in Ephesians 5 that we just read. He says, do good. He said, but instead of doing those works of darkness, he calls a Christian, expose them with the light. And that's why you see a lot of the, some of the most cutting edge, bulldogs, like in the political realm and things like that. Some of these are just Christian people that are good people, and they want light shined on corruption and darkness, right? And so that's one of the reasons we have this allure towards conspiracy theories, because as Christians, we don't want stuff hidden in darkness. We want to expose it. And whether you realize it or not, that as that light grows in you, you constantly want to expose things. You don't want hidden things in your marriage. You don't want your kids hiding things from you in their lives, in their rooms. You want everything in the light, so it can be exposed to the good. And so generally a well-meaning population, a public, wants light shined as well upon their governments, people who are ruling over us, right? We want the light to shine, right, on those things. And so that's why some of these subjects that we've seen out there, in the world, in the news, conspiracy theories, they're intriguing. Who's ever heard of the Epstein list? You ever heard of the Epstein list, right? So why is that intriguing? Because as well-meaning, good Christian people, we don't want that kind of stuff going on, right? We want it exposed and dealt with. We want justice to be done for these people, and we want these seemingly powerful people that might be influencing the rulers over us. We don't want them free from justice. If they're involved in this stuff, we want this stuff to be taken care of. That's why it's so alluring, because good people like us, general good people, we don't want this kind of darkness because we know what happens. It's inherent inside of us. Yeah.
I'm just very curious that from that truth and from, again, the basic of your faith, you also hunger for that justice. And that's in line with the truth. You want to expose it because you want the truth, because you really hunger for justice. Is that kind of in correlation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's a few other ones. We just recently, you see that those JFK files were released, and basically the consensus is that there was, although most of it was still redacted, but there was enough information there that a lot of political scholars, basically, and journalists agree that there were clear links to the CIA and the deep state involved in JFK's assassination. And now it's just now coming out, and these are kind of things that, it's just a conspiracy theory, shut up. But we don't want these kind of things, like hiding in the darkness. Who's doing this? If the most powerful organizations in the world, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, are over here doing nefarious things in darkness, like we inherit, that's what I'm saying. We know as Christians, evil happens there. It's hard to contain good things when you're doing these kind of things. Other things I think of, like kind of modern day conspiracy theories. I'm just asking questions here. Okay, I'm not inferring a bunch of things, but you probably guys remember the Thomas Crooks guy. He was the butler, attempted assassin to Donald Trump, right? And so, we're a lot of time away from that, almost a year or so, something like that. And I was like, we'll find out who this guy was or what was going on, and yeah, we're that far away. I guess this guy had like 4 cell phones. Different account, multiple foreign phone numbers that he had called right before he got there. He had foreign bank accounts as like a 21-year-old kid, with they found wire, and then all of a sudden it just was like, it's done, he's dead, we killed him, case closed. And so I just kind of scratched my head on things like that, so that's it. That's but then January 6th violators, they unfortunately they ping their cell phone one time, and you have grandmas and millions of people, and you have hundreds of people in prison within a month, and they know everything about them, doxed them, their mother's maiden name and blood type, and the FBI just wrapped that thing up real quick. And I'm just thinking, how can you do that fast with these people, but yet some dude that just tried to kill the incumbent president of the United States, we know nothing about? So it makes you question some of these entities that, are some of the most powerful places, and they're clouded in secrecy. And, we see a few other ones that, it's pretty clear now that, not that I'm endorsing, one person or other, but I'm just saying the facts, the Obama administration and Hillary together, that they used the DOJ to secretly spy on President Trump in order to subvert his presidency. And to me, that's not, it doesn't matter. You can change the names and faces. I don't care who the point is, you attacked me when you did that. You know, whether I voted for this person or that, the will of the American people said this is the person, and you used evil to stop that. And so whoever those people are in the future, whatever candidate it is, the evil is if you're using these type of secret places and you know, this backdoor evil like they did against Jesus, they conspired against him in stealth to kill him. This hasn't gone away. Evil's still doing the same thing, and we've seen it on display in America in the last few years, haven't we? You know, whether it's Trump or anybody, it doesn't matter if it's Trump. It's the point that people are using the most powerful organizations in the world to secretly execute evil things, and they're not putting it in the light. And so, as Christians, I think we still have an obligation to expose these things. And so that starts with us. You know, we understand this principle, but this is that evil operates in darkness. It conspires, and it tries to do that to maintain power over us. And it's every level. Okay, so personally, evil is trying to maintain power over me somehow. And it does it through darkness and deception. Now I got to be wise to that. And it all the way up to the level of the biggest governments of the world. Same tactic. Evil conspires in darkness and deception to maintain power over people. And so the first line of defense for me is personally. How do I combat against darkness and deception in my own life? I have to start with the man in the mirror. I got to do it as a Christian. I have to shine light of truth on my own personal deeds of darkness, my own personal struggles, my own personal sin. I got to take it before the Lord. I got to shine light on it, and I got to confess it before the Lord. My gossip, my evil thoughts, my anger, my lust, my greed, whatever it is, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Amen? And as I do that personally, I can then take it out into the world, right? I can then go into the halls of government and wherever it might be, or organizations or church or whatever, and expose the darkness with the light. Because this is how evil operates, and it's everywhere. It's even in this church. I'm just saying, it's in every church. I'm just saying, just be aware, it's also in this church. He's creeping around trying to find ways of deception and darkness, and the best way we can do this as Christians is to be good people, which good people is light and truth, light and truth, light and truth. Everywhere we go, just make that your theme. I don't want to hide it. Just bring light and truth everywhere we go. And so honesty is the best policy, right? Amen. You ever heard that before? And so I've heard a few politicians say that, but they don't really practice that either. Additionally, they were afraid of the people. It says, for they said, not during the feast, lest the people be in uproar, unless they face an uproar from the people. See, that's why evil tries to subvert every true, genuine democratic republic, because evil fears the people. Yep. Because it's accountable to the people. And look at all the forms of government that we've seen, the fascism, the communism, the dictators of the world. Do you think that Pol Pot, Hitler, Stalin, these different people that were responsible for murdering basically more people than anyone else in the 20th century, do you think they wanted a democratic republic? Do you think they wanted to hear from the people? No. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and they weren't going to tell anybody about it. They didn't want transparency. And so we have to be wary of any form of government that does not accept the will of the people. Any form of government that wants to shut down the voice of its own people can be dangerous. Because history tells us that. Because ultimately that tells me you're trying to hide something. And when darkness comes, so does evil and deception. And so that's why we need, even if it's to the fault of a country, or, some people say, well, like with the Epstein list, for example, well, there's some people on that list, some major world leaders that we might have blackmail over. So we don't want to release it all, because if we do, we might lose our power and control over this certain country, in which, we have better political ties with them. And in the big picture, it might be better for America. So that's one of the arguments out there that they made. To me, just shine light and truth on it. Let justice be done and the heavens fall. Just put it out there and let's do it. So anyway, those are some aspects of evil. All right, verse 3 through 9. Jesus anointed at Bethany. And this also parallels Luke chapter 7. And while he was at Bethany, and again, Bethany was in a small village of the town, east side of Jerusalem. It was close to the Garden of Gethsemane. And this was a place that Jesus liked to hang out. There was other miracles that happened in this little area, this little town. So it was kind of close to Jesus's. I think he had like somewhat of a cycle that he would do when he was in Jerusalem, around the area. And Bethany was one of the main places that he would frequent, that he would hit. He had people that really liked him there. And so Mary's family was there, one of the Marys. Anyway, verse 1. And when he went to Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. And there were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why has the ointment been wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you will always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, whenever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Boom. Prophecy fulfilled right now. We're still telling about what she just did, right? So, that's legitimately just came true. This is a genuine act of worship, and a genuine act of worship has no price tag. This woman it did not matter the price, because ultimately we give all to him because he gave all to us, right? He gave his all for us. So the aspect of our worship should be up to and including our very own lives as an act of worship. And so this woman is exhibiting this aspect. And we see the parallel in Luke chapter 7 of this encounter. The parallel of this encounter is a little bit longer in Luke chapter 7. But essentially, Jesus tells this woman, and he's like, leave her alone. And the scribes and the Pharisees are like, why are you letting her do this? And it was clear in that chapter, this was a sinful woman, probably a prostitute, might have been Mary Magdalene, we don't know for sure. But he does an interrogation, and he says, suppose there was two people, and one had this huge debt and one had this little debt. And the master comes and forgives both the debts. And Jesus says, how much do you think the person with the big debt is going to be more grateful than the little debt? And he says, this is what's happening with this woman. He says, the person who's been forgiven little loves little. And with this case of this woman, she had been forgiven much, therefore she loves much. And they didn't understand it. They didn't understand that this woman had been forgiven of so much. The least she could do was dump a jar of alabaster that was a year's wages, probably her family's wealth, on Jesus because she had been forgiven of her sins. She recognized him as the Son of God and worthy to be worshipped. And so there is no price tag on that type of worship. Worship is something that is priceless. And it touches a place inside of the believer that the world doesn't understand. And all these religious leaders in Luke chapter 7 especially, they couldn't understand what was going on. And he says, you guys don't even know. You didn't even ask to wash my feet. You didn't even greet me with a kiss. But this woman is washing my feet with her tears, has anointed me, and won't stop kissing my feet. You have not honored me or respected me at all, but this woman does. You guys don't understand. And it created such a disdain in them. The world does not understand the true worship of a believer. And it's something you just can't explain. And so what happens after this is that Judas begins his arc of evil. He decides in his heart after this what he's going to do. And these next few verses we see, verse 10, it says, Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money, and he sought an opportunity to betray him. So, I think this final encounter is what broke the straw on the camel's back for Judas. It was just too much for him. He could not handle, and we shared before that I think, and there's other verses that where Judas would call Jesus Rabbi and all the other apostles would call him Lord. He, at this point, it put him over the edge. He could not accept Jesus as the Son of God. He only saw him as a rabbi and a prophet. And so he was so greedy with the money, he realized, what are you doing? And in Luke 7, it says again, he's like, and I think he was amongst the ones that were chiming in, and they were like we could have sold this and for a year's wages and given the money to the poor. But
Money driven too.
yeah, Judas was greedy, but if there's something about following Christ, and sometimes we lose this when, in like big church atmosphere, it doesn't, worshiping God and Jesus Christ, it doesn't make sense sometimes. It doesn't make sense what he asks us to do. It doesn't follow the world's logical business format because we don't operate in the ways of the world. The church and the Christian life, it's not a business entity. You know, we're not like some executive organization. We are different from the world. And sometimes worship does not make sense to the world, and it sometimes doesn't make sense to us. But when God calls us and leads us in to certain things, He wants us to do it with a whole heart and in worship. And Judas couldn't handle that. He couldn't handle it. And so he was greedy. He didn't think Jesus was making good financial decisions. And he couldn't understand that this woman was worshiping him in such a way. And I think he was ready to